Okay, chapter 13, chamber music. Being a guitar player, I play a lot of chamber music. I play with a flute player. We play semi-professionally and professionally, which means sometimes we get paid. That's what that means. And so we do a lot of things together where we're deciding things that a conductor would decide. We decide what the tempo is together. We decide how loud and soft to play things. We decide when to breathe, how to do phrasing. Sometimes we do that on the fly while we're playing. We communicate to each other using looks, head nods, non-verbal communication. And if you read through page number 136, it talks about some of those things in there. On my little board here, I have here blank, duet, trio, etc. In other words, if you're hearing chamber music, you're hearing music for a particular set or sets of instruments. And so if we're hearing violin duets or flute duet, trio, then the instruments you're hearing are those instruments, one person on a part. So if there's a duet, there are two parts. There's flute 1, flute 2, or clarinet 1, clarinet 2, trumpet 1, trumpet 1, trumpet 2. And it's different music that's meant to be played at the same time. They start together, they end together. The thing that gets slightly confusing is when we're talking about piano trios and piano quartets. And, you know, as a young person, I thought a piano trio was 3 pianos playing at the same time. That's cacophony. That's 1, 2, 4, 6 hands being played, playing together on three different pianos. No. Piano trio is piano, violin, cello. Piano quartet is 2 violins, viola, cello, and piano. And the piano quintet is a string quartet, 2 violins, viola, cello, plus the piano. Okay, so, oh, did I screw that up? I'm sorry, let me get that straight. Piano quartet is 1 violin, viola, cello, and piano. My apologies there. Got ahead of myself. Piano quartet. Okay, so that's the piano, so don't be too confused by that. It says in the book here some interesting things that I'm going to point out. You need to know these things. Normally the chamber music is performed with 1 player on a part. That's true. So in other words, when Haydn or another classical composer wrote a string quartet, he wrote for 2 violins, each player on a part, 1 viola player, 1 cello player. Excuse me. It became popular later on to take some of those quartets and adapt them to a full string orchestra. So there could be, and I've seen performances of string quartets that are played by 30 string players, 10 violin players on violin 1. And if that's the case, then you need a conductor. You need somebody to decide what's going to happen. If there isn't a conductor, then those 4 musicians can, in their rehearsal, decide exactly what's going to happen. They'll put pencil marks on their music to decide how they're going to do things. And then during the performance, the first violin player is usually the one who is sitting in a way, they're in a semicircle, they're sitting in such a way where they can see the first violin player. They'll memorize, here's a bow, they'll memorize their first measure or so, they'll look at the first violin player, and they'll start together. And the bowing is interesting. I brought a little fiddle along here. I'm not a fiddle player, so if this sounds squeaky and horrible, I apologize. But the bowing is interesting. Now we think, and again, as a young person, I always thought the bowing was important so that they all looked exactly the same together. Yeah, that's kind of cool. They should all look the same together. But there's an actual real musical reason for doing that. With the violin, because your hand is up here so close to the strings, when you pull the bow down on the downstroke, it just sounds stronger than the upstroke. So if I start here at the tip and I go up, it just has a weaker sound than this, except for the little scratchy sound, sorry. And so you'll see some music, actually a lot of adagios and things will begin with an upstroke. A lot of slow, pretty music will begin with that. Yeah, I can't do it. With a slow upstroke. So that's the bowing. And that is discussed on page 136 in the blue section of the book. Okay, so in chamber music, obviously it's designed for chambers, for a small room. You can, and do often today, hear music that's chamber music performed in a large group, a large concert hall, but it was not designed for that. And when we do that, typically we have to amplify things, which I really don't like. So it's designed for an intimate setting. Okay, moving along. Franz Joseph Haydn, and I mentioned Mr. Haydn in a previous video where I talked about his farewell symphony, where at the end the players would extinguish their candles, pick up their music, and walk out, and what was left was the last, 2 or 3 people on the stage, Haydn conducting, and the prince, whom he was his patron, who he worked for many, many decades. Got the hint that, okay, these guys need a vacation. So that's just an interesting story, and that story is actually repeated here in this book, so I won't repeat it again. A couple of words and a form here to talk about. A couple of words that we need to know are opus. What is an opus? Opus is a word that indicates a collection of work by a particular composer. So, when it comes to cataloging music, which is not something that was thought about while it was being written, the music was written for a purpose. Handel wrote his water music suite for the King George to go on the water, and it was not named Water Music Suite until later. It was not cataloged as we catalog things today. But at the time, later on, historians did categorize music. So when we talk about a particular piece of music, we know exactly what we're talking about. So when we're saying Handel, which is a Baroque composer, or if we're talking about Haydn, who is our friend here in the classical period, if we're talking about an opus number, okay, they may share an opus number, but their names are different. So opus 33 would be a specific piece of music. It could be a string quartet by somebody. So that's what that means. So an opus number, different from a Kerschel number. Okay, now Mozart wrote more music than anybody. He I think I believe the statistic is if you played his music continuously from when he first wrote music to the end of his life, and you played that continuously, one piece of music after another, I think it would take up 2 full weeks of non-stop music. That's night and day without a break if you played that music straight through. I believe that's the statistic. So he wrote more music than anybody. So it was decided to give his music a Kerschel number. So if you see Mozart's music, you will see Mozart, and if you ever go to a concert, it'll be Kerschel number 363, which I believe is a horn concerto. So that's Mozart. He gets a special number because he's special. Okay, so that's that opus thing. Now let's talk about rondo. Rondo form. Lots of fun with the rondo form. Everybody likes the rondo form because people like to hear things that are familiar. So if you hear a rondo for the first time, you're hearing the theme, which is the A section. And then something totally different will happen. Either it'll be in a different key, or the music will have slowed down. There will be stretched longer notes for the next section. New instruments will play. And then the A comes right back. Oh, familiar, I've heard that before. And then something new. And then the familiar comes back. And then something new. And then the familiar again to round out the ending. Rondo form, lots of fun to hear when it comes to music. On page 140, the Sonata for Flute and Guitar, I haven't decided, but I think I'll put that on the website just on the Moodle page, just for giggles. It's not a required listening, but it might be interesting to hear flute and guitar, not me playing it because I don't actually perform this one with my flute player. We do different things, but it's a cute little piece of music. But don't be under the impression that the guitar was a major instrument. It was not. It did not become a major chamber instrument until actually the beginning of the 20th century. But there were some composers, and there was some music written for it. Okay, that's it for chamber music right now. On to chapter 14.